Thank you, Elisa. And thank you, Kiera. And I want to thank all of you all for joining. Again, my name is Che Rhymefest Smith. And as I listen to you all talk about reparations, I can see that everybody is kind of deeply entrenched in the work. You've been doing it for a while. You know the details of it. You know, I'm fairly new to the topic of reparations, not the overall subject of it, but the just really going in deep. What is reparations? Why are reparations needed? Why today? And so, you know, this conversation is one that I was having with Robin Rue Harris. I'm sorry, with Robin Rue Simmons, and it's in her wheelhouse of politics, real estate, community organizing. You know, she was kind of teaching me about the details of how to obtain reparations. And one of the things that I said to her was, I didn't believe that thieves gave refunds. And so what is the use of trying to get a refund from a thief? And, you know, this idea of a thief giving a refund actually came from a rap that I was writing, and I'm going to spit that rap for you. It's like, I'm ready to talk now, ready to confess. I ain't always believe I was ready for success. Things I couldn't accept was putting pressure on my chest, made me feel like I was stupid because I couldn't pass the test. Listen, the worst thing to tell a brother that can't read is that he can't read. Them is fighting words. You'll end up in St. Reeves. I know we got a lot of little problems, but they ain't these when Black men are the #1 endangered species. Please, I don't want to hear it from you. Took the spirit from you. They got my publishing cheap and took the lyrics from you. So vandalized by the sins we can't begin to undo. You thought by just getting their money, all your dreams would come true? Untrue. And still it worries me that Black men don't believe in voting. At least do it for solidarity. I know we want reparations and that ain't charity, but if you get it, that'll be the last time we see prosperity. I never heard of a thief giving a refund. Ain't no reparations, just Section 8 and a Nissan. And so with that said, my stance on reparations was not that it wasn't a debt that's owed or generational harm that wasn't inflicted, or institutional sectors that didn't deserve, you know, we didn't deserve compensation from. It was just that reparations to me always appeared like a national issue that was kind of too big for me and my wheelhouse to wrap my mind around or my efforts around solving. So, for example, I'm going to pull up an article that I had read in the, one moment, let me share this. Can everyone see on the screen here?
Yes.
Yes.
My screen sharing?
Yep.
Okay, moment. So, an article I had read in the New York, this was from the, one moment, the New York State Bar Association. Albany Law School professor Anthony Paul Farley, a former federal prosecutor, said, systems of oppression that shackle and demean Black Americans remain in place. So even if checks were cut tomorrow for the highest amount, you could imagine there would be procedures in place for white power to recoup it all the day after tomorrow. Asked where he would begin to implement reparations if they were given, Farley noted his credentials as a former federal prosecutor before advocating for the abolition of prisons and police, saying, we know prisons don't make people better. We've essentially abolished prisons for white people, and yet we incarcerate a higher portion per capita than the Soviet Union, the apartheid South Africa. We incarcerate more per capita than the People's Republic of China. Chains look good on Black people to most Americans. Also in the same article, William A. Darity Jr., a professor of public policy at Duke University, was quoted as saying, "Many Americans have come to see Black suffering as morally correct. If we introduce a wealth program, we have to prepare for a violent response. 30% of the population will resist any positive social change on behalf of Black people." And this is from the New York Bar Association, an article from the Bar Association. So, you know, again, my position is that on reparative justice is not that it shouldn't happen, but how can it happen? And so I started to look into, well, if we're to look at where is it happening, where do we see progress? I had started to see places of progress where my position began to evolve. As an international artist, a teacher, and organizer, I can see for myself at least 3 areas in my wheelhouse, 3 examples in my wheelhouse of where people like me can be the most effective. One is self-reliance. When we look at what can we do in terms of a people, you know, without the government, without waiting on an institution, what can we do? It led me to Ghana's Year of Return. In 2019, and right here in these pictures, you can see this is my church, Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church on the west side. Pastor Hatch, this was us all at the Year of Return. You got Chance the Rapper and Vic Mensa, who were bringing people to Ghana for the diasporic return. Also, we were working in schools over there. But in 2019, Ghana, a US-based Adinka group, encouraged African diasporans to come back to Africa, specifically to Ghana, to invest and to recommit to the continent, to settle in the continent. Now, this initiative was launched by President Nana Akufo-Addo to commemorate 400 years of the first enslaved Africans touching down in the Americas. The return also recognizes the diaspora's achievements and sacrifices in the time since we touched down 400 years ago. The Year of Return has been widely successful every year since its inception, with up to 1.5 million tourists, including celebrities, politicians, and world leaders attending, with over $1.9 billion in revenue generated for Ghana's economy. The tourism sector has recorded a growth of 18% in international arrivals from the Americas, Britain, the Caribbean, and other key countries. It's estimated that the spending that tourists that Ghana have seen from the tourists has increased by 18%, and is a perfect example of how our diasporic collective efforts and self-reliance can actually see returns for harms that have been done. Now, since they've initiated the Year of Return, Ghana is now doing Beyond the Return, the African Renaissance 10-year project from 2023 to 2030. So that's one place that I saw change is actually happening in restorative justice with self-reliance and with diasporic communion. Another thing, and Robin was talking about this, my big thing is cultural currency. And when I talk about cultural currency, what I mean is using our culture as leverage for social and political justice. An example of that is our power in entertainment, our power in influence and art spaces, using our gifts to also influence and reshape policy. So I want to tell you guys a story about this picture here that we have up. In the month of June 1981, Stevie Wonder released a song called Happy Birthday, known to many as the Black Birthday Song. And a 15-year effort to get a Martin Luther King Jr. birthday to become a national holiday. Before the passing of Representative John Conyers, this is the bill that he was working on to get the King holiday to be a national holiday. It was held up in Congress by represented by Senator Jesse Helms, as well as President Ronald Reagan, who just would not pass the bill over decades. Stevie Wonder, after he made the chart-topping song "Happy Birthday," it took 1 year for that song to gain so much momentum that there was a fervor for this to be a national holiday. And right after that, Jesse Helms and Ronald Reagan called it a tyranny of the majority, and it was signed into law. This is proof of number two, using our art, using our influences and our gifts to actually leverage for social and political justice. One moment. The third place where I saw that progress could be made is encouraging foundations and cultural institutions who actually built their fortunes on the backs of enslaved people by stealing our artifacts, our ideas, as well as our land and our art, to begin seeding some of that power by training and funding new leadership. My example for this is the Skillman Foundation, which is a 62-year-old, $700 million endowment that recently began training and empowering youth of color in Michigan and the Detroit area to dole out to causes they deem important to their own futures and communities. So instead of a picture, what I've done is invited one of the youth from the Skillman Foundation, who was actually trained to give out some of that power and dole out some of those resources that was taken from the community, to tell us more about his journey in the Skillman Foundation. Now, I'm going to introduce Logan Newman, who served as the first 2020 to 2022 Youth Council on their cohort. He's going to speak about his experience in helping to distribute over $300,000 to 100 different organizations. Logan, are you there, brother?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Good. Thanks for being here, man. So, I learned about you and Angelique Power, and she introduced me to you. And the Skillman Foundation was so excited about seeding some of their power to Black and brown youth to reshape you guys as communities. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions so people can kind of learn what they can do in their own communities. How did you first hear about Skillman and decide to become a part of that effort?
Yeah, so this was about 2 years ago. The opportunity was passed on to a past friend, and the friend wasn't able to be a part of the first youth council cohort because of their age. So they passed the opportunity to me. And before then, I never really heard about philanthropy or what that meant or what that space really looked like. My first taste of philanthropy was doing volunteer work, doing service work, things of that nature, just giving my time and my service to my community. But I was unfamiliar with the sector of institutional giving and giving capital to other organizations around the city of Detroit to help, fulfill programs for Black and brown marginalized youth in the city of Detroit.
And what was some of the training that you underwent to prepare you for how to actually allocate resources back as a part of the cohort?
Yeah, so the foundation was, I was blessed enough to receive training on how to do strategic planning and conduct research that is conducive to the mission at hand and my mission. And that is to help give power and funding to grassroots Black organizations that are doing great work in our community. And they were able to not only give us education and knowledge about how to give these grants and give this funding away to these organizations, but also helped us build a connection with these organizations so we can understand that the work that they're doing in the city as well, and giving us that tool and the data to conduct that research and find out who we wanted to give funding to and who we wanted to support.
Which organizations or what kind of organizations did you give funding to and why?
So most definitely, I made sure that I gave funding to Black-led, Black organized grassroots organizations that are doing small overlooked work in our community. A couple organizations such as Money Matters for Youth. That's a small nonprofit organization in Detroit. And what they do is they help teach financial literacy to Black and brown youth in low income neighborhoods to help fight that wage gap by financial literacy and education, as well as another organization called Life Leaders Detroit. Life Leaders Detroit helps Black and brown youth with professional development skills, job training, things of that nature. So I was just making sure that I was allocating my part of the funding to organizations that I see personally, that are one Black led, but two are doing a lot of great work in our community that's being overlooked by a lot of the corporate and government sectors in the state of Michigan.
Do you believe that the experience you had at Skillman can be a model that's used in other underserved or communities that were taken advantage of? Is this a model for the future moving forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, most definitely. It can definitely be used if used correctly, but just making sure that you know making sure that youth have a voice at the table and have power most definitely to make decisions and make changes in their respective communities and to see the outcomes of those changes. So definitely can be duplicated within multiple organizations, whether they are public, private sectors, or nonprofit organizations.
What do you personally think inspired Skillman to see power to, because usually when we see these big foundations or nonprofits, it's like we're begging them for money and then they choose where the money goes, how the money is spent. What do you think inspired Skillman to kind of see their power and train you all on how to fix your own communities? Like, what did you see from the inside?
Yeah, so Skillman has a long history of advocating for youth justice, youth activism.
Mhm.
So they really decided with the youth council to um, put the power in our hands and let the reins go and to kind of step back into an advisory position as adults within the process of institutional giving. And what that did was one, give us more power and more control, but two, also give us a taste of what that looks like when you become an exec or a CEO of a organization who has such a large endowment, or even a private organization who has to give money on a nonprofit level, what that really looks like and how that can be conducted.
What would you do now that you've kind of been through that program? What would you do to make something like that better and to get foundations to seed even more power? Like, what have you seen that we can grow from with that type of restorative justice?
I believe bringing youth table more, bringing youth voice. So when you have these meetings such as these, and you have these roundtable talks and these discussions, a lot of times you don't see that youth advocacy or that youth voice because a lot of decisions that are made at these tables mostly affect youth, especially in the city of Detroit and state of Michigan, respectively. So the best thing to do is to make sure that no matter what conversation is being had, where it's being had, or what the topic of the conversation is, making sure that there is youth representation at that table because youth opinion and youth voice matters just as much as our adult industry leaders.
Yeah, yeah. Man, thank you so much for coming here, man. I love you, bro. And some people might have additional questions for you if you can stay. You know what I'm saying? That would be real dope. You know what I
Most
mean?
definitely, I definitely
Alright.
have
So
me.
with that said, you know, the three things that I saw in my wheelhouse, and I think, you know, I guess the way me being new to the reparations conversation, you know, I just looked at it like instead of looking for a check from the government, which may have a violent response or be too big for some, you know, where is your expertise? So Robin Ruth Simmons' expertise was in politics, community organizing, and real estate. And that's where she was able to attack it and actually get a positive response on reparations on that side. Mine is art. So, you know, in international teaching. So I'm looking at Ghana and the Year of Return. I'm looking at how can I use my music as a way to, as cultural currency to influence policy and social justice. I'm looking at foundations that fund art, but have been taking from art for generations to now seed some of that power back to the community. So communal and diasporic self-reliance, cultural currency, and institutional reform. And with that, we can finally make a covenant bigger than the continent, larger than the biggest tribes, bigger than the government, Mother Earth, motherland. Put us on your mothership, beat the drum, light the fire. Here, take a puff of this. Now that we intimate, let's bring our family together and form a syndicate. We'll build a city from the sand like the Emirates, a birthright where melanin is your membership. Remember this, never swap diamonds and gold for a Bible. Transatlantic trade, you'll be dead on arrival. It's like, wait, smoking weed, watching Roots with an African that asks, did that happen? Well, yeah, thanks for asking. Slashing stuff from whips to still slashing. I don't pick cotton, but we such slaves to fashion. We pick capitalism over compassion and beg Allah when the economy is crashing. So let's form a covenant bigger than the continent, larger than the biggest tribes, bigger than the government, Mother Earth, motherland. Put us on your mothership. When the family's together, everybody's loving it. And that's a wrap. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you. Can we give Shay and Logan a round of applause before we get into our Q&A? This is really great.
Love, 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 love.
Thank you. So now we will take a few minutes to ask some questions. So if anyone has some questions, please raise your hand using the raise hand button. And then after that, we will move to our closing remarks. Okay, I see Stephen Cross's hand up. Stephen, please ask your question.
Shay, I really appreciate like seeing all of your music firstly. And then secondly, I know that you've been working a lot with Indigenous folks and I'm waiting for the Superman and Shay crossover. How do you think that like what have you learned from from being with Indigenous communities and working now with this new sphere of reparations? Are the two aligned? What lessons can be learned? Can you share some information for us?
Yeah, I think Logan can speak to this as well, because one of the things that the Skillman Youth Council voted on was coming to Cody, Wyoming, and going on a nature retreat with about 12 Indigenous youth, where the youth from Detroit were actually able to mentor Indigenous youth. And I remember Logan saying something at the end of the retreat where he said, wow, I've never thought about my Black privilege. Like when in comparison to what he learned about Indigenous youth. And when I think about that, to answer your question, Black people don't include Indigenous enough when we talk about reparations. This cannot be a nationalistic effort where we, and this is just my observation, It should not be a nationalistic movement where we act like the people who stole from us to people who were stolen from. And so a better way to combine our efforts and actually be more successful in this act to go for reparative justice is to learn more about what Indigenous people have lost and how we can help them as we all help one another get justice. And I'd be interested to know too, Logan, do you remember that, the experience with the Indigenous youth, and what are your thoughts in terms of the Indigenous and when people as we move toward reparations?
Yeah, I think one thing, especially as being a Black American, that we can get caught up in is like just having a victim mentality and thinking that we are the only ones who went through plight and went through struggle, and not realizing that reparations is everyone who's been marginalized and disenfranchised deserve reparations, including us. And we're not the only community of people who have been marginalized and disenfranchised. And just opening my eyes up to that. And what it did was, one, it humbled me, but it also made me work a little bit more intentionally as far as the work that I do in my community to serve Black communities.
Mm.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you both. We have a question from Brother Jamoke. Please ask your question.
So 2 questions. One, just wanted to know what's the age range, Brother Logan, for the program, the Skillman program, and how old were you when you were when you joined it? And then for you, Brother Rhymefest, what do you think that specifically artists could do more in terms of supporting of the reparations movement? I'm thinking about not just Stevie Wonder, but also like Self-Destruction, CD, song that came out, Live Aid, Farm Aid, all these times when artists came together, We Are the World, to support different causes, and how we could maybe organize something along those lines for reparations.
Logan?
Yeah, so the Skillman Foundation, they service youth from, I would say, the ages of like 8 to 24, because that's where we usually gauge youth. It's either 8 to 24 or 14 to 24 in some cases. But I was 20 years old when I was introduced into the opportunity, and I'm 23 now.
And you know, one of the things that in terms of artists, you have to make it easy for them. You know, what entertains you trains you, and a lot of artists have been trained by the capitalism of the art. However, if you look at movements like what Mayor Adams and KRS-One is doing with the 50-year anniversary of hip hop, Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago is honoring the hip hop community. Well, we need the most influence, we need artists of social influence like Chance the Rapper, myself, KRS-One, to actually engage the municipalities who are acknowledging hip hop, and then use that to engage the foundations and number one, understand the issues. So, you know, we need people like, you know, Kiera and Robin Rue Simmons to continue reaching out to hip hop artists and doing panels and inviting people, you know, like, you know, myself, to understand more about the issue, and then connect us to the municipalities, and then pressure the foundations who give the money to fund the self-destructions. You know, one of the problems we have is when everything is about the capitalistic aspect of it, you're not going to get the bang for the moral buck that you're looking for. So, you know, that's where I go back to these institutions that have always used art and rappers, and they're good at writing white papers and empathizing, but they're not really good at seeding their power. They fund white-led organizations that have Black kids in it, instead of Black-led music organizations that can really help repair the community. And that's what reparations would look like from that end, getting those foundations and institutions to train and empower Black artists in their own communities.